John, if we can go ahead and go to the slideshow.
Sure.
Hisepi, his Hisepa, if I can say it correctly, is the name of the Black Hills, and it's kind of like Denali in Alaska. Uh, we want to call it, Mount Hood, but the natives just keep calling it Denali. This is Hisepa, which is the Black Hills, and you can see it covers quite a large area of land. The Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851 was signed on September 17th between the United States and representatives of the Cheyenne, the Lakota, Dakota, the Arapaho, the Crow, the Assiniboine, the Mandan, the Hidatsa, and the Arikara nations. And the treaty set forth traditional territorial claims of the tribes among themselves. In other words, here's this plot of land. You guys we've all agreed that it belongs to you, and the tribes themselves need to figure out how to divide this up in the colonial idea of land ownership, which is not anything close to the way that Native people see the land. And the Native tribes agreed to guarantee safe passage for settlers on the Oregon Trail in return for promises of an annuity in the amount of $50,000 for 50 years. And just to put that into perspective, in today's money, that would be $1.6 million a year. And according to the historical records I could find, the Native American nations also allowed roads and forts to be built in their territories. But I'm thinking it's more like the federal government decided that roads and forts needed to be built, and they got built. Easier to get forgiveness and permission. The United States ratified the treaty, and they added an article, Article 5, which adjusted the compensation from 50 years to 10 years if the tribes accepted the changes. And all the tribes, except for the Crow, accepted the changes on that. So the Crow said, we're holding out for $1.6 million for 50 years, and everybody else agreed to take that amount of money for 10 years. Several tribes never received any of the commodities that were promised as payments. The treaty produced a brief period of peace, but it was broken by the failure of the U.S. to prevent the mass migration of settlers and miners during the gold rush into the territories. And it's not like the U.S. government couldn't enforce the treaty to keep out the immigrants. It decided that it just didn't want to. So that's kind of that history. And if you could go to 2, John. Slide 2. Thank you. This is what the area looks like now. It's 8,426 square miles, which makes the land area we're talking about for the Black Hills is 3 times the size of Delaware. There are 853,000 people, so a little over 750,000 people in that area, and 80% of them are white. There's been some, and this is catching you up to current day. In South Dakota, there was a county called Shannon County, which is in this area, and it passed a vote by the citizens of the county to rename that county to Oglala County. So that's a positive thing that has happened. Right now, one of the tasks that the natives in that area have undertaken is to rename Harney Peak in the Black Hills to Inyankaga. Harney Peak is the highest point in the U.S. east of the Rocky Mountains. but the name is very objectionable because General William S. Harney led a massacre of the Lakota people in 1854 during the Indian Wars, and his most famous battle in that campaign was at Blue Water Creek, which actually was a massacre that rivals Wounded Knee in its senseless brutality. So, chopping off body parts and throwing them around and making leather items out of people's skin and things like that. Those things went on. And so it is also a mountain that has sacred meaning, and the Lakota would like to have that renamed, and that's what they're working on now. If you could go to slide 3. Peshla is a spot in the Black Hills. It's Peshla means the bald spot, and according to the Lakota, it's the place where the stars fell, and it's where they track their beginnings from, along with several other nations in that 7-nation group that signed the treaty for the Black Hills. And if you could go to slide 4. Okay, the auction and saving of Peshla is something that happened in 2012. There were rumors of roads and development, and people got all upset about it. And it was an area of land also known as Reynolds Prairie. It was owned by the Reynolds family for about over 100 years. And they decided they were going to sell it at public auction. Well, that would be like deciding to sell the Vatican at public auction. And so the tribes rallied from as far away as Canada. They raised funds. They about $9-10 million worth of funds. These poor people that don't have much of anything at all managed to raise these funds. I was actually on part of the internet, the Twitter campaign for raising the funds, and they were able to purchase Peshla. We're going to run a little clip here about the announcement of the actual, they were able to purchase Peshla. And before we run that, you're going to hear people referring to the IRA. That's not the Internal Revenue Service. That's the Indian Reorganization Act, or the Howard Wheeler Act, which was an imposed form of government that was placed on the tribes. That's a long subject for for yet another episode. But when you hear that, just understand that when they talk about the IRA government or an IRA council, they're talking about councils or items that are government entities that were established under the Howard Wheeler Act and are not part of the traditional governance that the traditional people of the tribe recognize. And if you could run that clip, John.
Once the land is gone, we're going to just be a bunch of brown poor people. Our identity is the land. That's why we still are who we are, because we have a land base. And the struggle is going to go on one generation to the next as long as we have a land base.
This started for us months ago. When our THPOs started coming back, our Tribal Historic Preservation Officers come back telling us they're going to expand the road in East Rochford Road that goes through the heart of Peshla, and they're going to blacktop it. So everyone was kind of, talking about environmental impact statements and all of that, and kind of put it off to the back burner. Then we came down because we were fighting another cause for our elder, Vern Traversy, which some of you have his shirts on. And we're sitting here talking about civil rights in the Eagle Stop parking lot, and Peshla came up again. So we start talking about what we have to do to help stop this road from being blacktop and expanded. Take it back to council and throw out Peshla there again and kind of put back to the back burner. Then I buy a Native Sun News, and right on the front page is Rodney Bordeaux, and it says, the nations only have till August 25th to come up with $10 million because Peshla is on the auction block. So as we start, gathering everyone, and the journey began at Buffalo Creek on the east of our reservation out towards Blackfoot. Just right where the buffalo come down to that creek, our buffalo herd comes down to that creek, we met there. We had Thippos there, Phyllis Young was there, we had folks from Sisseton there, all kinds of grassroots people started organizing. So that kind of leads you up to this point of the timeline. And if I ever get removed from the IRA government, it's going to be because they're going to impeach me for speaking too much. Because they always try to gag order me, but I feel that I have an obligation to the Cheyenne River Oyate to speak the truth, to be honest, and to always let you guys know what's happening. Uniting and coming together as people, and people are going to continue to walk all over us. It doesn't matter if we're from Cheyenne River or we're from Arizona or for New York or from our sisters up and brothers up in Canada. We have IRA telling us they want to do this. We have different treaty groups telling us they want to do this. We have very respectable medicine and spiritual leaders telling us they want to do this. And everybody has a different thing that they want done. And all I'm asking for you guys to do is to take it back to whoever your spiritual leaders are, your treaty council, your IRAs, and let's come together. Thursday, it got, some people went to Laura Brule and they sent me to Rapid City. And when I went to Rapid City, I thought I was going to be in a room full of other elected officials, but it wasn't. It was Mark Van Norman, Gay Kingman, myself, Terry Pachota, and Ike Schmidt from the Tribal Land Enterprise. And there they had negotiations too with the realtor. That realtor was there. So from there they decided what was going to happen and who was going to sign these papers. So they went back to the conference calls and they got everyone on and they signed them papers, they submitted them, and they said, no, we got one more person that came in. So the tribes came back again on a conference call. By then, I was on all the conference calls, but here my son, he went missing for over 13 hours, so we were out searching, and I didn't get on them last conference calls because my son was out missing, and they came out and they told me I couldn't speak anymore to the press or anyone. So I said, you know what, I've been asking for 2 weeks now, faithfully, who's going to be the people signing off on this? Who's going to be the Great Sioux Nation spokesperson, and who's going to be the ones to back these loans that we're going to have to come up with the other half of the money? Who's going to do that? And then were some of the questions that we needed our other tribal leaders to be on the phones to do. So they did that. They got it together at the last, and here is Peshla. It's no longer on the market. It's going to belong to all of you guys. All of you.
We are here to talk about a sacred place. A place called Peshla in the Black Hills. Peshla is the center of the Black Hills. It is our Garden of Eden. The Lakota Dakota are negotiating to purchase Peshla, known to the Washechus as Reynolds Prairie and translated Bald Spot. Peshla is where our stars fell, which is where there is a bear or bald spot in the Black Hills. Peshla represents our beginning. our birthplace. It represents the power of women, the power of water that comes from the 7 stars. It's the relationship between the Lakota, Dakota, and the Star Nations. As we know it, the stars are the holy breath of the Great Spirit, Monia of Wakantanka. This action to keep Peshla is a responsibility to our generations, our duty to our spirituality, to our freedom of religion and our birthright. This action is not for economic gain or political control. Peshla will remain a cultural and ceremonial place. Lakota Dakota, it is our duty, our obligation to uphold our cultural beliefs and connections to Mother Earth and the universe. Lila Wopila to the individuals and those who answered our call, the men, women, Ojis, tribal and spiritual leaders who motivated this spiritual quest to keep our sacred place. Lila Wopila to the tribal organizations and tribal nations who committed millions of dollars for this transaction, and a special Wopila to the Reynolds family. For Lakota, Dakota, there is only a beginning, there is no end. And so as we continue and renew our belief systems and our ceremonies, Lehichiape, we urge our people to go to this sacred place, to pray, to do our ceremonies, to honor our women, to teach our children, to honor our water, and to honor all Lakota. Lehichiape, continue as human beings to contribute and share our life systems with the world and the universe, so peace at a bare spot, Peshla, becomes a universal symbol of peace everywhere. Lila Wopila to my ancestors for keeping this sacred belief for the next generations. That's my...
So that was the announcement of the successful purchase of Peshla. They were able to get it taken off of auction. The family was very amenable to allowing the process to go forward privately instead of subjecting it to an auction. It would be the same thing as auctioning off your mother. And so they understood the sensibilities that needed to be observed, and they were able to get the land back. It's being held in common. The Lakota Dakota actually own the land, but they are, they are more than owners, they are custodians. And that brings us to our last slide. John, if you could slide that on over. Slide 5. So getting back to the question of how to give back the Black Hills. And the first thing that I learned in talking to folks in that area is that the ideas need to come from the people. They can't come from outside. They can't come from a court decision. The Supreme Court actually said that the 1851 treaty should have held, that the Black Hills should have remained in Native hands. And so using the Washichu, the idea that you can be made whole with money, they gave the Lakota money for the theft of the Black Hills, and the Lakota refused that money. They refused to take it because they will not sell their mother. They will not accept the money for it. And so how we go forward from here, first of all, the ideas need to come from the people. And when I say the people, I mean the Cheyenne, the Lakota, Dakota, the Arapaho, the Crow, the Assiniboine, the Mandan, the Hidatsa, and the Hurikara. They are the people who should have custody of the Black Hills and do not. The other thing is there's 750,000 people living there, and so if you give back the physical Black Hills, then there's 80% of those people are going to be dispossessed. And, the piddling amount of money that the U.S. government has given as the amount to compensate for having stolen the Black Hills is, first of all, not enough. Second of all, if you offered the people who own that land in the Black Hills area the amount of money that the U.S. government gave for, or said that they thought was just compensation, those people would not sell. So, and the other thing is in talking to Lakota people in that area, they don't necessarily want to evict everybody. But they do want custodianship, not ownership, but custodianship. We are entrusted with taking care of the land. That is the teaching from my people. That is the words that I hear from the Lakota people. And as custodians, we have a say in what goes on there. What kind of extractive mineral technologies are being used, and water distribution and whatever else has to do with the land. That is our understanding of what our purpose is. So the idea of custodianship is one that seems to be coming from multiple directions from the people themselves. And another idea that I heard was that the money that should be given back from the government, instead of calling that the purchase price or the money that you get back because of having stolen the land, so this makes you whole, call it rent, call it retroactive rent, call it repayment for minerals, gold and uranium and things that have been taken out of the ground there. And then going forward, the idea of rent, and just like for instance in Washington State, the Tulalip tribe allows people to build houses on their land. And just like in a trailer park or some other place where somebody else owns the land, you pay rent to the tribe. You have a lease. You have a lease for so many years, and there's covenants in there, and you can do things and you can't do things, and grant the control of the land back to the people. And so that's pretty much my thoughts. I'm open to anybody else's thoughts, and I'm going to look down here and see if I can see any questions that people might have had along those lines. Let's see.
What's up, Kelly?
Not too many questions yet. People are just really inspired by everything that you're saying and wanting to do something and wanting to see change, and kind of talking a little bit about how we are living very selfishly in this country, and we're very focused on profit, and we're not focused on the right things. Kind of
one of the points. Yeah, thank you. One of the points that John Trudell makes over and over in his speaking is that there are things that we want because we want them, and there are things that we need that we want because we need them. And we need to get back to remembering the difference between those two things.
Yes.
You can't have candy for breakfast. I mean, if you're an adult, you can choose to have candy for breakfast, but you shouldn't.
Exactly.
You know that if you're eating candy for breakfast, it's not going to do you good things.
Well, and
So
it's about what it's doing to the entire world as far as when we put our focus on profit and on expanding and expanding and not focusing on preserving, we lose a lot of culture, we lose a lot of heritage, we kind of become this amorphous blob without any real value or truth left. It's just get money, get more things. And everyone is so unhappy. They're so unhappy right now. No one's satisfied. No one's finding, peace. And I think a lot of it has to do with that. So thank you for, your show and for kind of bringing
yeah.
it to light.
Well, the divisions are the same in Indian country. You have traditional people, and the traditional people want nothing to do with the government or anything else, and they can go on and on about how evil the government is. And trust me, with the history, you can understand where they're coming from. Then you have folks that have a foot in both worlds. That's kind of where I'm at. I was raised traditionally, but I've been outside. I know my language and my ceremonies and my culture. And I've been out in the world, so I kind of have a foot in both worlds. And then you have the total urban Indian who has never been on the reservation, was his or her parents moved off res when in the 50s and the 60s when they were giving relocation money, maybe knows enough language for ceremony purposes, but knows it by rote and is not fluent. And they all have different points of view on this.
So, Pat, we got a question from Mike Hyde asking about whether or not you feel like there's been any progress happening, or are things getting worse? I know progress is kind of a loose term. There's probably different levels of that. What do you think?
I think that the divisions that I just enumerated are being used by the corporations to try and get in there with the extractive technologies and the pipelines and the uranium mining and the copper mining and everything else.
How are the divisions making that happen, though? So you're saying the divisions are making that happen. How do you mean?
Well, if the people were united, it would be easier to be able to fight these things than the people divided.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And like for instance, traditional people. I am a supporter of an ally of a traditional group on the Lakota reservation. I have invited them to come on the show. But the person who I'm speaking with, who is another one like me with a foot in both worlds, said, look, these are traditional people. I know exactly what he's saying. They don't want anything to do with the outside world. They don't trust them. They think that whoever is going to be trying to co-opt them and use them for their own purposes, and they're very distrustful. They don't want anything to do with the outside world.
How do you think that gap can be bridged, though, when there's so much distrust and so much betrayal that's happened? What do you think that we could do?
The natives are pretty good at making alliances, so I might make an alliance with you over water, for instance. I might not trust you for anything else, but you and I can agree on the water, so we'll be allies for that. And but the problem is this, and consensus is a big part of the culture. So you have a lot of talking, and that's why I said that right now with getting the Black Hills back, we're in the talking stage of how we're going to do this and how we're going to make alliances and where do we agree and where do we disagree. And it's a very passionate subject. So you get folks that, will just completely go off if you start talking to them about something that they totally disagree with another group on. And the point is that, as this goes on, as people begin to come to a consensus, then you'll see more movement in this area. Now, there's a consensus on the pipeline. And you've got every tribe from Washington State to Maine and down to Florida and into Arizona that agree on that.
So is there any coalition building that's happening between the tribes where as a place where people can go to find at least some common issues?
Yeah, I picked out a couple that I found that appear to where we have consensus, and that would be the Honor the Treaties group, and the link is in the description down there. Um, for It's an artist group that brings awareness to various causes. They put up large murals and things in urban areas to try and draw attention to various causes that have a consensus. So, and outside people can support Honor the Treaties. They sell their prints and their T-shirts and things that help keep their part of the movement going. There's also the United Urban Warrior Society. They are also working towards building a consensus on the Black Hills in specific. And so you've got the Honor the Treaty folks are kind of the transitional natives, where they've been either raised off-res or raised with a foot in both worlds. And then the United Urban Warrior Society is actually more traditional and has traditional folks in it.
Okay. So we have another question from the commenters.
Sure.
What are some of the biggest issues that the tribes get stuck on where they can't agree?
A lot of it has to do with worldview. So, when I'm talking about land ownership, for instance, the urban natives were, well, take the money. Take the money and then we'll start buying stuff back. And the traditional people are going, no, the land is not for sale. It's never been for sale. We're not going to say it's for sale. There's absolutely no way that anything is going to be taken as far as money, period. End of subject. Will not budge on that. So, and now this idea that seems to be percolating around about custodianship rather than ownership is, I think, a place where that may end up being bridged. Only the people themselves, can say for sure, and they're not my people. So, and this is a very Indian thing to do, and I hate to say this for you guys, but this is where that goes. I am not Lakota. I am not Dakota. I am not Cheyenne or any of the other tribes that are listed there. Not only that, but I am one Indian. I'm not a whole bunch of Indians. So I can only speak for me, and I can only speak out of the context of my people.
Okay, that makes sense. I mean, when you're talking about custodianship, are you talking about like gifting the national parks, that movement that's going on?
There is that, but it's the idea that the land isn't owned. In other words, and I'll go back to the Tulalip tribe. You can rent or buy a house on Tulalip Reservation, but the house sits on top of the land. The land has nothing to do with the house.
Makes sense.
And you get a lease that allows that house to sit on that land. Even if you buy it, even if you build it, you have a lease. And that lease has conditions. And so it's kind of like the trailer park idea. You have a trailer, and you park it in the trailer park, and you pay rent on that.
So we had another question from Darren Lawson Husking in the comments section about broadband access for schools, libraries, and the community. How is the access on the res to the outside world? Is it easy for them to get this kind of information, or?
No, it's not easy. A lot of information is spread by radio broadcasts. Almost every reservation in the West that I'm aware of has a radio station. KIRI in Lakota country is one that comes to mind real quickly. Mm-hmm. And so there's that. Also, people talk to one another. In our busy urban world, I know, in our busy urban world, we all sit in our houses and and run around in our, one person in a car, and maybe you see a few people at work, and you might talk to somebody on the phone or on the computer.
Right.
There you go down to the local taco shop, or in some communities it's an ice cream shop or the general store, and you see your neighbors and you talk to one another. And so we call it the moccasin telegraph. It's amazing how quickly something will get across the entire country from some little incident that happened in the middle of Wyoming somewhere.
I love that.
Let's see, do we have more questions? I think I see some more yellow here.
I think we got, let's see.
I'm going in the wrong direction, of course. How to organize millions of people across the nation, that is the question. How to organize people, natives or people non-natives, because it's a totally different worldview. With natives, you need to sit down and build consensus. You need to talk this out and see where you agree and where you disagree, and how you can move a little closer. Maybe there's one issue that you agree on, but then you find two or three that you might kind of sort of agree on, and so you talk it out until you can figure out a place in those two or three that you can more or less agree on. If you leave this part out and I leave that part out, then we could agree on, 2/3 of that statement. And so getting natives organized is a whole different ball game than non-natives. Non-natives, it seems like, to organize them, you have to motivate them to get out of their houses and to get up and move, and it's a rah-rah experience. It's a motivational experience.
So we got another question from Darren wanting a little bit of clarification on the access we were talking about and how the moccasin. What did you call it?
Moccasin telegraph.
Yeah. So he was actually wanting to know about the impact on small businesses and what kind of little economies that are created there, what kind of businesses are being run, and obviously that's impacted by not having that access. So what? Right.
It depends on which tribe you're talking about. Now, if you want to talk about the Lakota, they have virtually on the Rosebud or the other, I can't think of the other name now, reservations, the ones that are like the poorest of the poor. They have substandard housing. They have, in order to build housing, they have to ask the federal government, the BIA, for permission. And it's a whole big game on trying to get anything done on the Rosebud and those reservations, because the federal government has made the bureaucracy so heavy that it's impossible to get anything done. And so not only do you not have any businesses, but the unemployment rate is something like 80% of the people are unemployed.
Unreal. So you just mentioned that, like, the federal government having to come in and give approval for this, that, and the other thing. It's still true that they have no representation in Congress. They have millions of people and no representation, and yet complete federal control over their land.
Correct. Yeah, the Native American reservations are lands that are held in trust by the federal government, and that means that basically the position of the natives are as what they call dependent sovereign nations. So we allegedly are supposed to be able to rule ourselves. But they established what our government should be, and even in some cases appointed or decided, kind of like the government that y'all have on the outside. Somebody else decided who your representatives were going to be. They let you vote, but you had a choice of A or B, and both were picked by the federal government. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, the America is that they followed the reservation model on you guys, and you want to go look and see how bad it can get. Go look at Pine Ridge. Go look at
Yeah.
Rosebud. Um,
It
it can
it
get
just seems
really
like
bad.
it seems like it can't be a movement of just the Native American tribes anymore. It seems like what needs to happen is everyone needs to get on board. Um,
Well, yeah, there's
so
been a lot of alliances that have happened. The one that I'm thinking of in particular was last summer. Not this past summer, but the summer before. We had the Cowboy and Indian Alliance out of Nebraska, and they rode horses from Nebraska all the way to D.C. and had a great big, huge. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of people that came out for that, and made demands on the White House steps, and all that other stuff, um, on the KXL pipeline going through Nebraska. Of course, the back and forth on what's going on with the KXL. And the last thing I heard was Obama has decided not to let the Trans Canada drop the KXL petition, and he's going to rule on it anyway.
yeah.
So, and the thing is, they're dropping it because it's no longer economically viable for them to do that. Now, in 1987, I was in northeastern Utah, and they were working on a shale oil project there, which was the forerunner of fracking. And the price of oil went down through the floor, and they capped all the oil wells in the Uinta Basin, stopped the oil shale development, said, well, that's it, we're done, until here in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and voila, not only was oil shale back, but it was back with a vengeance and called fracking. So they don't, their whole life of value is to maximize the profit. Right now, when we have a breath, when we have, they've decided that they are going to take their ball and go home because they can't make any money off of it. Now is when the environmentalists should really start working on legislators to bolster the laws that will block some of this stuff, so that when the oil companies come back with this, okay, and now we're ready to go again, they won't be able to do it because it'll be against the law. That's just me, though.
No, yeah. I completely agree. I think that we don't take it seriously enough and that there aren't enough people that are really calling attention to it. So it's important that we have this show and you and all of the other natives that are fighting for for that side of things. Not enough voices. I think that's it on the questions. I haven't seen any more popping up. People are just, again, expressing their gratitude for these episodes. Brenda Brown, thank you for doing these episodes. It disgusts me so many people don't pay attention to what's befalling our land and our brothers and sisters, and that sentiment's kind of just shared by everyone. So thank
Yeah,
you.
we're pretty much the canary in the coal mine. At some point, I'd like to do an episode on the Alaska villages that are being moved off the islands that were their ancestral and reservation homes, and being having to be moved inland because the islands are becoming submerged. And this has been going on for 5 or 6 years
Yeah,
now.
I did see an article about that as well, and just seeing the tiny sliver of an island. That's basically there's no chance they're going to be able to stay there with the way the seas are rising, even if we turn everything around now.
Yeah, well, the seas are actually reclaiming chunks of the islands. Are falling into the ocean, and buildings are falling in with it. And they're having to move the people. There's no other way to deal with it. But it's something that I think needs broader coverage as well. At any rate, getting back to my schedule here, they make me have a schedule. An Indian with a schedule, that's funny. Um, we I'm going to do a little plug for Bernie TV since they're kind enough to give us a space to do this in. They're looking for folks to stream Bernie rallies on Saturday in South Carolina and on Sunday in Las Vegas. So if you're in that area, you know somebody in that area that would like to stream for us, they Bernie TV would appreciate it. The email is info@bernie2016.tv. And the other thing that I'd like to mention upcoming in Native Life, which I always do at the end of every show, tomorrow night, come back, because the first annual Indigenous Justice Symposium is being held at the Evergreen College. It'll be from 7 until 9:30 Pacific time. And obviously we will stream it and record it. Friday at 10 in the morning until noon 30 Pacific, we're also going to be streaming. They're having a panel on the coal trains and the oil pipelines that are trying to send stuff out through the Puget Sound. And so that'll be real interesting. Next week is Veterans Day on Wednesday, and I'll be talking about the Native contribution to the defense of this country. Here with a song as we usually do, and this one is by Bill Miller. It's called Ghost Dance. It did make like the top 40 in the U.S. This is a very good recording from the Native American Music Awards, which is another one of those things that most people don't know about. And we'll just let Bill sing Ghost Dance. See you tomorrow night.
I wanna go where the blind can see. I wanna go where the lame will walk. I wanna see the sick ones clean, where the deaf can hear the silent talk. I said, where are you going? Are you going to a ghost dance in the snow? I am a mighty warrior. Yes, I'm finally coming home. I wanna know where the dead are raised, where the mountain lion laid down with the lamb. I wanna stand where God is praised. Ride across the plains to the promised land. I said, where are you going? Now we're going to a ghost dance in the snow. I am a mighty warrior. Yes, I'm finally coming home. Oh yeah, oh yeah. Voice. No starvation, have plenty to eat. No guns, no wars, no hateful noise. Just a victory dance will never taste defeat. Where there's nothing done or said that can't be forgiven. Every step you take is on sacred ground. Walk away from death to the land of the living, where all the lost tribes are finally found. I said, where are we going? Are we going to a ghost dance in the snow? I am a mighty warrior. I'm finally coming home. I said, where are you going? Are you going to a ghost dance in the snow? I am a mighty warrior. Yes, I'm finally coming home. Oh, I'm finally coming home. Oh, yeah.